Straying pilgrims in the path that's often dim, but cheer us on our journey till we sing this wayside hymn. Yonder over the rolling river, where the shining mansions rise, soon we are home forever, and the smile of the blessed giver glands all along the eyes. Here we are often weary on the hills that drum our way. Here the tempest darkly gathers, our hearts within us say, yonder over the rolling river, where the shining mansions rise, soon we are home forever, and the smile of the blessed giver glands all along the eyes. Here the souls are often fearful of the pilgrim's burning cold, but the Lord is mighty defender, and He tells us we may know. Yonder over the rolling river, where the shining mansions rise, soon we are home forever, and the smile of the blessed giver gladens all our longing eyes. Jesus for the wild Every sunshine in my soul today, more glorious and bright than glows in any earthly sky. For Jesus is my life. Oh, the sunshine, blessed sunshine, while the peaceful.
I just need to come say good morning.
Good morning, how are you?
I'm great.
I have a question. Are you working in the golf shop any at all?
I'm probably going to start next week.
Okay. You've got a windbreaker, and I know that Dwayne does.
Good morning, everybody. We got a lot to cover this morning. I hate to break up. Y'all are lively this morning. Apparently, turkey, ham, dressing, mashed potatoes, all that stuff does y'all good. Coffee too. Yes, coffee. So we're going to start off as we always do with prayer requests. Anybody have prayer requests? Looks like you had a good, successful procedure, and we're thrilled about that. Yes, ma'am.
We have a friend that's in the hospital now, and they're giving him a week to live. His name is Butch Morgan.
Goodness. Okay, Butch Morgan. Okay.
And keep David's brother Billy in your prayers. He's still going through chemo.
Okay. Others?
That's Garland.
Garland is doing better, but he still has about a couple of weeks that he's not supposed to lift anything.
What about Terry?
Yeah, I have not heard about Terry Pruitt. Anybody got an update on him? Okay, looks like there's no update on him, so, yes.
I heard that Rex Anderson is doing pretty good, and he's up walking around, and he's gonna have physical therapy coming to his house this week, so they'll keep him walking even more, I think.
Okay, so Rex Anderson's doing better.
Yeah.
Good. All right, if there's no other, yes.
A football official up in Jacksonville, his son passed away. He was a football official also, about 35 years old, so Garrison.
Goodness. All right, will you go with me to our Father in prayer? Our most gracious and loving Heavenly Father, we are so grateful for this day, and we're grateful for the season in which we turn and give thanksgiving, and we have much to be thankful for. Not just the physical blessings, dear Lord, but the spiritual blessings you give us so richly every day. But we are grateful for, it appears that people are doing better, that Rex Anderson's doing better, that we have successful surgeries, that people are recovering, and we're grateful for that, dear Lord, and we know that all those good things come from you. We do ask that you would be with David's brother, that you be with the official, the football official who lost a son. We ask, dear Lord, that you would watch over them and that you would give them comfort. We're ask that you give comfort to that man that was told that he had about a week to live. And we know, dear Lord, that you can do amazing and wonderful things. And we ask, dear Lord, that if it be your will, that that would be the case. We ask now, dear Lord, that as we go into our study today, that it would be profitable. I'd ask that you would give me ready recollection of the things that I've prepared, and help all of us to just gain more knowledge of how to follow you by our study of those who followed your Son. In your Son's name we pray. Amen. All right, so I think this is where we left off last week, and Pam, I promise I won't keep you late next week. I don't know about this week, but next week I won't keep you late.
We know that.
I'll be keeping Trailblazers late next week. So we know that Simon Peter was going to be the leader of the apostles. He was chosen from the get-go. And we kind of know this because in the lists of apostles, he's always named first. In Matthew 2, it talks about that the names of the apostles. First, Simon, who was called Peter, and his brother Andrew, James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John, and then goes on and on. But that word first there, it is very important. It just doesn't mean, okay, the first guy that I'm going to talk about, or the first one mentioned. The word first there is actually a Greek word. It's the Greek word protos. And if that brings to your mind something, that's great, because protos means first, foremost, or chief. Not just in a list, but in importance. And it is where we get the word prototype, which is a first building of something. So Peter was going to be a prototype. He's going to be kind of a prototype for church leadership. So what makes Peter a prototype of a leader? What did he have that identified him as a leader? What was part of him? Because there are a lot of great contrasts in Peter. There is the fact that Peter speaks more often. No other apostle speaks as much. No one talks as much as Peter did. And yet, at the same time, no other apostle is spoken to by Jesus as much. There's no other apostle that we know that rebuked Jesus more, and yet Peter was rebuked more by Jesus than anybody else. There was no apostle who so boldly confessed Jesus, and yet there was no other apostle who verbally denied Jesus like Peter did. But despite all of this, despite all of these contrasts, he's like not here, but he's like here. 1 minute he's here, 1 minute he's here. But despite all of that, he had within him, he had the raw materials of a leader. And he would go through the life experiences that would shape him into a leader. And lastly, and probably most importantly, he had the character qualities of a true leader. So, what do you think? Is a leader born or are they made?
Yes. Yes.
So we've got yes, we've got both. And I agree with all of that. Yes. They are born and they are made. You can have some of the innate gifts. You can have some of the drives to be a leader. But you may never make it there. You may be inquisitive. You may ask a lot of questions. If you look at Peter, if you look at Jesus, what was Jesus' basic way of teaching? He would sit there and he would ask a question. And then he would get an answer. And he'd ask more questions. I mean, he did teach, yes, he did teach by parable, but one of his ways of teaching people was to ask them questions. So when he says, what is the greatest command? When he's asked, what is the greatest command? He said, well, how do you read it? He was the master of answering a question with a question that would make the person think about it. But Peter asked more questions than all of the other apostles combined. So he was incredibly inquisitive. And he always asked for an explanation. Here in Matthew 15:15 it says, Peter said to him, explain this parable to us. He wanted to know what was going on. And he would give a voice to what other people were thinking. So the other apostles might have been thinking, I have no idea what Jesus is talking about, but they never had the guts to just ask. Peter was just, whatever came across his mind, it was coming out his mouth. And here I think he believed that the only dumb question was the one that you don't ask, because he was asking questions all the time. Peter was also a person who took initiative. He would take the bull by the horns. Not only did he ask questions, but he was always like the first guy to answer. And I think that makes a good leader. If you're willing to answer questions, if you're not afraid to be wrong. I think in an earlier lesson I talked about on the submarine that if you were indecisive, if you in any situation, if you did the right thing, then we don't have to correct it. If you did the wrong thing, we can correct that. But if you sit there in the middle and you can't come up with an idea, or you get bogged down by all of the data, and you're indecisive, then we can't do anything with you. Peter was never afraid to be wrong. Probably because he was wrong so very often that he was like, you know what, it's just kind of my MO. I'm going to answer the question. Maybe I'll hit somewhere on the dartboard. But he was bold and decisive. He would leap and then look. If you look in Gethsemane, what did he do in Gethsemane? Pulled out the sword, right? I never really understood the significance of what he did until I was reading and found out that they came with a cohort of Romans to arrest Jesus. And a cohort of Romans was about 600 armed soldiers. And here's Peter. You know, they said, we've got 2 swords. Peter had 1 sword, somebody else had another one. With 1 sword, he's going to take on and not only that, Peter, untrained with the use of a sword, which is probably why he got the guy's ear. He was probably aiming for his throat. But with 1 sword, he's pulling it out, and he's going to take on a Roman cohort. He's going to take on 600 highly trained military people. So I think that's bold. I don't think it's particularly smart, but I think it's pretty bold. But something that would have to happen throughout his life is this leap then look would have to be changed, would have to be toned down. He would have to learn how to look at a situation before he decided to take action on it. Peter was involved. That's another thing that you need to do as a leader. You need to be involved with the people that you're trying to lead. I was here on Tuesday morning doing some work for getting ready for service this week. And I wasn't expecting, usually when you come early in the morning on a Tuesday to church, you don't expect to the building, you don't expect there to be anybody but people in the office. I was very surprised there were people in the gym. And they were getting ready for the service project tonight. And what really surprised me, and I was thrilled to see, one of our elders was there working. He was involved with what was going on. He was showing, I am involved in the work of the church. I'm not just sitting back and being a leader of the church. I am actively participating. When I was in the military, I was very pleased that the people that were under me in the division that I was the division officer for, I wouldn't say that I led them. That was more, if you've been in the military, you know the NCOs lead. The non-commissioned officers are the ones who are kind of leading the men. You're just kind of nominally in charge. But they always said, we really appreciate you because we know you won't ask us to do something that you either haven't done or won't help us do. And that's what a leader needs to be. A leader needs to be somebody who's willing to get into the trenches with people, willing to get their hands dirty. Peter was involved. He always wanted to be around the action. He wasn't one who just stood from the side and said, I think you should do it this way. Instead, he was in there trying. You don't follow leaders who are distant. A true leader is someone who gets down there in there with the people. We call our elders shepherds. And I don't think you can have a shepherd who isn't actively involved with their sheep. I think, in Jesus' day, you could tell who a shepherd was because they smelled like sheep. And our elders here, I do believe, smell like sheep. And even though Peter would deny Jesus, he did it from a place that was as... I promise he took a shower this morning. Even though Peter would end up denying Jesus, where was he when he did that? He was as close as he could possibly be at that time to Jesus. He was close enough that Jesus could eye him right as he did it. So he made eye contact. He was within eye shot of him. And he was, as I think I'll put it in a later one, he was in the lion's den. I mean, he was surrounded by people who would have willingly, they were ready to string him up too. So, this is one of my favorite quotes from our former president. It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbled or where the doer of deeds could have done better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena. If you are in the arena, if you are in the trenches with the people you are trying to lead, you are a true leader. And Peter, I believe, seemed to live out this quote, that it is better to burn out than to fade away. I don't think Peter ever had a day where he wasn't burning bright. In addition to the raw materials, Peter was going to have life experiences. And life has a wonderful way of shaping you, doesn't it? I don't think anybody who can remember back to when they were 20, and I'm having harder and harder times remembering back to when I was 20, what I thought my life was going to be and where I thought I was going to be. But life has a wonderful way of interceding and of shaping you into a person that you never thought you would become. Anybody got a life story of how life shaped you?
Became a father at 19.
Huh?
Became a father at 19.
Became a father. That'll shape you, will it not? That completely upends your world, doesn't it? And changes you completely. Peter was given life experiences. that would take those raw materials that he had and they would shape them. He would be thrown onto, he started out as a lump of clay and he got thrown onto the potter's wheel, and life had a way of shaping him into that leader that he was eventually going to become. I always loved this. How do you become wise? By making mistakes. How do you end up making mistakes? By being unwise. So sometimes it's those mistakes that you make early in life that will eventually make you wise later in life. Peter had those, as I think I mentioned last week, he lived on that emotional roller coaster. And he would have great personal highs, like where he says, "You are the Christ," and Jesus comes back, "Blessed are you." And then immediately after, he's crushed by being humiliated, by being called Satan by the same person who just praised him. Peter was going to be sifted like wheat. Actually, they were all going to be sifted like wheat. Why did they have to be sifted? It says here, "Simon, Simon, Satan has asked to sift all of you as wheat. But I have prayed for you, Simon, that your faith may not fail. And when you've turned back, strengthen your brothers." Prediction of him denying and fleeing. But why did he have to be sifted like wheat?
To test our faith.
Okay, to test faith.
Faith and strengthen it.
Okay.
You want to get rid of the chaff,
You want to get rid of the chaff. Why do you want to get rid of the chaff?
because it's useless and will ruin the wheat that comes through when you want to grind it, and that way what you have as an end product would be tainted if the chaff was left.
Okay, excellent. So I actually spent, yes,
To see who he is.
to see who he is. I actually spent some time learning about wheat this week. And wheat is basically a grass or a grain that has a hard outer coating that makes it completely inedible for human beings. It's perfectly good for animals, but human beings cannot process unprocessed wheat. I think you remember the story where the apostles and Jesus are walking through the fields and they pick up some and they rub it in their hands. They're getting rid of that hard outer coating. If you don't get rid of that hard outer coating, then it's non-nutritious for your body. Back then, and actually when we a long time ago we went to Mount Vernon, and they still will show you how they farmed at Mount Vernon today, back how they used to. And my daughters actually got to thresh a little bit of wheat. It's a hard job. But what you do is you take and you thresh the wheat by beating it with basically a flail to crack that outer coating. And then you're going to take and winnow the wheat by throwing it. What they did at the time was throw it up into the air when there was a light breeze blowing, because the light breeze would blow away that hard outer coating. And then the wheat would fall and the chaff would go away. Once you have done that, once you've removed the outer coating, then it can be used to feed people. Yes.
When you look at verse 31, that's not a plan to improve Peter. Satan's betting that Simon is more chaff than wheat. And that's why, Jesus has to pray that your faith may not fail. So, Satan the accuser is it's not out there trying to make them better apostles.
Oh, no. But he has to go through this. He has to get rid of his hard outer coating. Because if he doesn't get rid of his hard outer coating, how is he ever going to spiritually feed the church? Because if he stays with his hard outer coating, just like unthreshed wheat, he's not nutritious for human consumption. If he stays and continues to have his hard outer coating as an apostle, he's not going to be able to feed the church. So yes, they all had to go through this, and absolutely, Satan did not mean to just... Satan always means things one way, and God manages to turn it around, right? I love that. Throughout the Bible, Satan has one plan, God turns it around. It's just wonderful how God can take any situation and make it work in His plan. But all of them were going to have to go through this so that they could feed the church later on. And something that popped into my head as I was looking at this, is this maybe somehow linked to later on where Jesus tells him, "Feed my sheep." Now that your hard outer coating is gone, now that you've been broken down to something that can actually be nutritious spiritually for my sheep, now feed them. And after he was sifted, Peter was virtually never Simon again. So you can have the raw materials. You can have life experiences that might help you make a leader. But without having the right character, you're not going to turn out to be the kind of leader that you should be. I kind of thought of it this way. You can have a ship that has a hull, has nice sails, but if you don't have a rudder, you're not going to go anywhere you want to. You're just going to go wherever the wind blows you. And if you don't have the right character qualities within you, what is it Jesus says? Did you go out to see John a reed blown by the wind in whichever direction? No, you went out to see somebody who was planted firmly, who had that character. He wasn't just saying what the people wanted to hear. I think we get plenty of that these days, don't we? By our supposed leaders who just want to be popular. And they'll say whatever they have to say to be popular. Can you name a great leader who didn't have a great character? I mean, we can name some evil people out there who led. But I don't think you think back in your mind and come across a leader and say, well, they didn't have much character. Christ exemplified what that great leader should be. All of these adjectives right here. He was trustworthy. He was respectable. He was unselfish. He was humble. This is what we're looking for in leaders. Certainly leaders of the church should have all of these. I don't think we ever get there, do we? Where we have all of those within us. But we keep trying. And the leader has to embody the characteristics that they want other people to have. Jesus embodied every one of these because he wanted all of us to eventually have them as well. Kind of seems counterintuitive that to be a great leader, you first have to be submissive. Do we have any people in here who served in the military? Okay. Before you can be a general, what do you have to be? Before you can be that general, you got to be that second lieutenant who's taking orders. Before you can be, I was in the Navy, so before you can be an admiral, you have to be an ensign. You have to learn how to take orders before you can give orders. And if you're going to demand submission from somebody, you have to display that you are willing to submit. Jesus demands that we submit. And the only way he can do that is by the fact that he submitted to God's will. He's demanding that we submit to God's will. He's demanding that we follow his example. And if you can think of one thing that really defines his life, is submission to God's will, no matter what. Peter learned this from Jesus, kind of in an interesting way, a way that I hadn't really thought about before I studied on this some. In Matthew 17, you've got Peter and you've got Jesus, and somebody comes up to Peter and says, "Does your master not pay the temple tax?" Now, this was a tax that was not to the Romans. It was a tax that was used entirely for keeping up the temple. Well, who was Jesus? Jesus was the Son of God, right? So Jesus turns to Peter. Peter says, yes, of course he pays the tax. And he goes to Jesus and says, we need to pay the tax. And Jesus says, who do the kings of the earth tax? Do they tax their children? Or do they tax other people's children? He's saying to Peter, I'm the Son of God. I am not under obligation to pay this tax. The temple is God's house. He's my Father. I'm not obligated to be taxed to take care of it. But he tells Peter, even though I'm not obligated to do this, we're going to do it anyway. And then they have the miraculous, I wish I could catch this fish sometime, open his mouth and find money in it. I've caught two fish at one time where one was eating the other, but never caught a fish with money. Peter learned it so well that here in 1 Peter 2, he says, therefore submit yourselves to every ordinance of man for the Lord's sake, whether to the king as supreme or to governors as those who are sent by him for the punishment of evildoers and for the praise of those who do. So when we submit to things that we don't think that we're subject to, we are doing it for the Lord. We are submitting to the authorities of this world for the Lord. Just as Jesus was showing, I'm going to submit even though I'm not obligated to do this. But I'm still going to do it. Jesus showed submission and taught Peter how to submit. Something that Peter had a really hard time doing was restraint. Because he just loved to open his mouth and insert his foot. But he had to learn how to not do that. He had to learn how to restrain his own impulses. And leaders are generally people who like to be in action. You don't find CEOs who just like to sit back and just watch things. Usually not good CEOs, right? They're not ones who are given to having a lot of self-control. I've had a lot of bosses who were extremely good at yelling and would blow up at a moment's notice.
But I don't think all leaders are like that.
Good leaders, I don't think are always like that.
No, I don't think they are, because they've learned restraint. A good leader learns restraint, but a lot of times people that we think are leaders aren't necessarily good leaders because they haven't learned that restraint yet. Instead, they don't have much in the way of self-control. But unfortunately, a lot of leaders today, I'm going to okay, this is the only political I'll get. Our current president doesn't seem to have a lot of restraint sometimes. That's as political as I'm going to get on this. But when Peter was young, when he was Simon, he's like that fiery stallion that needed to be broken. He's that guy who was just ready to run, and I'm going to go wherever I want to. Okay, one of my absolute favorite movies of all time, Guilty Pleasure. If you've never seen it, you really should. It's a beautiful movie, and absolutely nothing bad in it. The Man from Snowy River talks about this young man, and it's a man and a horse, and it looks. If you remember the old Marlboro commercials that came on TV, the whole movie looks like that. It's awesome. But it talks about breaking. One of the main thrusts of the movie is catching a wild stallion and breaking the wild stallion. Peter needed to have that restraint. He needed to learn that restraint. So Jesus put a bit in his mouth. It's amazing that you can control a horse with a little bit in their mouth. But Jesus put a bit in Peter's mouth. Okay, I heard people talking out there. I thought we were really close. Which is bad because I still got 5 slides. We might get out on time. And he put a bit in his mouth by rebuking him in front of everyone. Right there in Gethsemane, where he says, if you live by the sword, you're going to die by the sword. And he tells him to put it away. And that helped Peter learn restraint. Peter also needed to learn how to have and to practice being humble. How to have humility and practice being humble. A lot of times leaders will get puffed up. When I was in college, I preached my first time, and I had all these people come up and tell me what a great job I had done. And it has a tendency to go to your head. And I was like, oh yeah, I don't need to do that. I definitely don't need to do this for a living, because this could really build me up to the point where I probably couldn't come through a door, head-wise. But Peter needed humility on that last night. Because he goes in and he said, everybody else is going to might betray you, but not me. And I've always found that eating your words is never a pleasant situation, and they never taste good. They might taste good coming out, but they never taste good going back in. When I was in the military and I left Orlando, Florida after nuclear power school, I said, I am never going to live in Florida again. And for 9 years, I had to eat those words. This time when we left Florida, I was like, I hope to never live in Florida again. I'm not ever going to. Anytime you give God an absolute, He has a way of making you do it. I think after eating those words 3 different times, having Jesus call him out 3 different times, he learned his lesson. He learned to be humble. In 1 Peter 5, verses 5 and 6, it says, likewise, you younger, submit yourselves to the elders. Yea, okay. Old Testament. Yea. All of yon, whoa, goodness gracious. I got like Middle English here. Okay. Humble yourselves therefore under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt you in due time. I think I got Old English there. Peter also needed to learn true courage. Well, we talked about that he was already ready to take on a Roman cohort by himself. Doesn't that show courage? Would you call that true courage? All right, I need somebody to answer here. Okay. It's stupidity. I was nice and called it impetuous bravado, but stupidity works too. So what is true courage?
Willing to take the risks that goes with being faithful.
Take the risks that go with be faithful no matter what. I think is what you're trying to get at. Is that accurate?
Do the right thing at the right time for the right reason, which goes exactly what...
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's not a one-time thing. It's not that flash of bravery or flash of stupidity as in Peter's. It's a way of living. It's doing what's right no matter the consequences. And Peter showed true courage. He showed true courage on Pentecost. Just 40 days later, they had crucified somebody for getting up and going against the leadership. On Pentecost, Peter is out there preaching in front of everybody, showing courage. And then, again in Acts 4 and 5, where he stands up to the Sanhedrin. After the first time he's been arrested and left overnight, and they bring him before the Sanhedrin, and he says, we got to do what you can tell us to stop, but we're not going to stop. These are the guys who voted to kill Jesus. And they're trying to intimidate him into being quiet. And he's like, we're going to talk about what God tells us to talk about, no matter what you have to say about it. That's true courage. Standing up for what you know is right, no matter the consequences. If you haven't, for those of you who have not been in service yet, Chris has a wonderful illustration of true courage. Peter needed to learn how to learn compassion. How do we learn to be compassionate? I already got 5 minutes, Pam. I'm gonna make it. How do you learn compassion? By having compassion shown to you, okay? Galatians 6:2, bearing each other's burdens. That's compassion. Matthew 5:41. I think one of the best ways that you learn compassion is walking a mile in somebody else's footsteps. You want to know the compassion of being a caregiver? Go out and be a caregiver for a while. You want to know what how to be compassionate towards people who are going through terrible things in their lives? Guess what? The people who have gone through terrible things already are usually the ones who are the best at showing compassion to those people. Often the people who've dealt with the greatest trials in their life are the ones who are best at being compassionate to others because they've been there and they've seen it. They know what is needed at that time. And Peter learned compassion. He learned compassion because he was sifted. Jesus tells him afterwards, talking to Peter, come back and strengthen your brothers. He was crushed when Jesus looked at him after he had denied him that third time. He was crushed. So he, having just gone through one of the most terrible things that he could possibly think of, came back, and what did he do? He was compassionate to his brethren. He also suffered persecution throughout his life. All right. See, I told you I think we're going to get done. 3 minutes. We know a lot about Peter after the Gospels. We know that he preached at Pentecost. We know that he was the leader of the early church in Jerusalem. Spent a lot of time there. We know that he also baptized the first Gentile, which is interesting since he was supposed to be the apostle to the Jews, basically, and Paul was supposed to be the apostle to the Gentiles. We also know that he traveled at least to Antioch, and that he took his wife along with him. It says there in 1 Corinthians chapter 9. And we know that he was going to die a martyr. We don't exactly know how. There is speculation out there, and it's mostly Catholic tradition, that Peter was crucified in Rome upside down after he watched his wife be crucified. But there's not any biblical evidence of any of this. Most of what we know comes from late 2nd century texts, mid to late 2nd century texts, which is after the Catholic Church was founded. But we don't know those things for sure. Those are just speculation. But we do know that he was going to die a martyr's death because Jesus basically told him, this is, you're going to die a martyr's death. All right. There are a million lessons from Peter. I just came up with a couple here, 3. Learning that self-control. Learning to keep that foot out of your mouth is really, really tough. But it's absolutely essential. I think a lot of us see pieces of ourselves within Peter. And I think it's because even though he started out and Jesus said, you're Peter, or actually you're going to be Peter, he had a long way to go from Simon to get to Peter. And I think all of us have a long way to go in our own journeys. Peter was willing to admit when he was wrong. He was willing, probably not thrilled about it, but he was willing to eat his own words. And he never gave up. He never gave up on growing into the leader that he would become. I'm on time. I have really enjoyed this quarter. I've enjoyed every one of your comments, and I thank you so much for being such a wonderful group of people to study with. Thank you for pushing me to get better. Everybody have a wonderful day.